It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy. Back with Hometown Commander. We're back for another episode of kind of these main test deck updates videos we're doing this week. And our little break between Karlov Manor and Fallout. In yesterday's video, we talked about my main decks, the changes I've kind of made for them for Karlov Manor, or thinking about making for them, and what the state of what I consider to be my current main slate of main decks are. But today we're going to talk about the test box and what I'm brewing at the moment, kind of talk about what's on the horizon, the decks that I'm still tinkering with, or I feel like I'm almost there on, and talk about what's interesting me, outside of the main decks, or the decks that I consider to be mainstays in my box. Well, my goal since Universes Beyond has started was, since I love this format, and I love what this format brings for both a social standpoint and the deck building, I made it my goal to build a deck for every Universes Beyond set that we get. And the first of those sets, the first one that matters here for the purpose of this, was Warhammer 40k. The Tyranids deck was something immediately that got my attention, being in Teamer. Caring about X spells is something that, of course, I really enjoyed with my time with Zaxara and Sultai with Hydras. And so this is a deck that I really love. I had it together and I pulled it apart just because I really wanted to sit back down and redo the deck, make it into something that I wanted to play more, and just take a look more at the cards that are in the deck that aren't the original 40k cards, and shift them slightly, put in new ones, take out old ones, that kind of thing, as well as really look at the supporting spells. We got Wave Goodbye and Ripples of Potential in that Merfolk deck, and these are both cards that are really good for this deck, considering you're putting almost everything in with a +1/+1 counter on it. And if you don't, Magus puts 1 counter on a creature every combat. Getting Jai Assimilating Inferno and Comet Storm seems like something that would be good for ways to potentially deal some damage to our opponents and try to end the game that way. Bringing back in a card like Inspiring Call that I cut for some reason. Bringing in the Skullspore Nexus from Lost Commander Ixalan, and the Uncivil Unrest from that March of the Machine Commander decks, but really just like retaking a look at the list and trying to make it better. It was actually these decks that got me interested in the idea of 40k and what 40k was. I have a friend who plays 40k, and this is the deck that got me into Tyranids. This is my Norn Emissary that I just recently built, and so this Tyranids deck is what got me into 40k, playing Tyranids as my primary army, getting the models, putting them together, starting to learn to play the game, and so I really enjoyed this deck, and I wanted to make sure I brought it back. So it's back. We're going to re-put it back together and find a deck list that I really enjoy. And again, what's cool that I like about this deck is anytime a new X creature comes out or an X spell, we go, does it fit into Magus, and make it happen. For all the decks we talk about today, the deck list is going to be down in the description if you want to take a look at it. And if you're interested in me doing more of a deck tech on these, I'll probably be doing them in the future to go over them. Next up, we have a precon that I got for Christmas that I decided to upgrade, and that's Urza, Chief Artificer. This was a deck that I liked immediately upon release. It's crazy to think that this channel started about when these decks came out, if not just before it. It's a commander I always liked because I love the idea of just getting the constructs and building this construct army. It's not meant to be super sweaty. In the sense that it's not meant to be super oppressive with any combos. The sweatiness of the deck comes in some of the support pieces we're playing, or the Mondrax, the Urzas, the Mana Rocks, that kind of thing. But again, get the constructs, have some fun. The big changes as of late, we're adding things like Cyberman Patrol, Cyberman Squadron from the Doctor Who decks. Squadron being the best one, giving all of our non-legendary artifact creatures Myriad, meaning that those constructs get even harder to deal with in combat. Cyber Controller from that, getting us more artifact creatures. But I did a pretty recent update to the deck, and a lot of it was really trying to sit down and think about what the deck's trying to do. I added in things like Their Numbers Legion from the Necron 40k deck, making a bunch of tokens, Fabricate to go get some of our important artifacts, Thousand Moon Smithy from Ixalan to make gnomes on the backside. Those gnomes can be equal to the number of artifacts we control, giving us basically another copy of these constructs. Mindling Mech is kind of a fun vehicle, as you can crew it with a construct and effectively turn it into a 4/3 construct that gets the +1/+1 from there, making it a massive flyer that our opponents have to deal with. And using things like Legion Loyalty into the deck to just make it bigger and harder to deal with. Legion Loyalty giving all of our constructs myriad, and having our opponents have to deal with that. I added Sidri as a way to potentially give them lifelink. I mean, I could have added Whip of Erebos as well, and it probably would have done the same thing, which now that I think about it, probably would be better. But you know what? Hey, that's what brewing and deck building is all about, learning your lessons and iteration and making decks better. But this is the spot it's in. I'm getting ready to test this one, put it through its paces a little bit more, and see if I've found the right spot. Illustrious Wanderglyph and Threefold Thunderhulk are cards I've got to play with and had a ton of fun with, and I'm excited to see where this deck goes. I was worried that it would feel too samey to a Layla, a deck that I have in the main box, but what I like about a Layla is it tinges a little bit more towards the tribal and the art and the enchantments, whereas this one tinges a little bit more towards those artifacts, and I think they can exist in the same spot. Well, Elevir was a deck I had played around with for a long time, that precon. And I truly loved the precon, but the more I realized that I looked at Elevir, the more I realized I loved my Sithis deck, and I regretted taking it apart. This is a deck that it is not a weak deck. This is one of those decks that can absolutely punish your opponents. I'm now realizing that it says 99 cards. I should say 100. I'll figure that out later. It's a deck that can absolutely punish your opponents if you don't remove Sithis early and just slamming enchantments down. It's got a couple ways to win. Heliod plus Walking Ballista is one way to win. Sanctum Weaver plus Gauntlets of Light can actually get you infinite mana and end the game with things like Approach of the Second Sun. Really, the deck's been added ways with things like Words of the Willing or Luminarch Ascension or Sacred Mesa to just make a ton of tokens and give them haste, something like Concordant Crossroads to end the game that way. Just added a bunch of other ways to end the game. But really, it's a deck that cares about getting enchantments on the battlefield and just slamming into our opponents and getting our way to victory. Calyx is a card that's been a ton of fun to play with in the deck that was not there the original time I built the deck, and it's pretty bonkers. Same thing with Elevir coming in and being able to give each of our creatures that all that glitters type effect. It's pretty darn good. And then Yenna's put into some work as well as support for Sithis. But Sithis, Turbo Spam Enchantment, it's been a ton of fun, and I'm glad to have it back because it's a deck that I really enjoy. Getting into kind of the new decks that I've put together. So we talked about a deck for each of the universes beyond. We have Timey-Wimey right in the main deck box for Doctor Who. The Lord of the Rings set was one that I was between two different commanders. I kind of always wanted to do something with humans, so it was going to be Eowyn or 4-color Aragorn. But when I read Galadriel, Light of Valinor, I was like, man, there's a lot of really good elves in this set. They just did the Simic Elves deck, so there's a bunch of elves laying around, especially great reprints on that deck. And this scene box plus that deck is kind of a great start to a deck, and I decided that's what I was going to do. I'm going to test out Bant Elves with Galadriel, taking everything in that deck that's pretty good or cares about scrying and mix it with the +1/+1 counters that we get in Bant and just try to have some fun. The big thing, though, with this deck and the thing that kind of helped me start to change what I was kind of looking at as far as the landscape of my decks is, between Magus, Lucia Kane's Tyranids being a X-Spell deck that cares about counters and Galadriel caring about counters, it's going to make a deck like Hackball Merfolk probably be a little bit too many +1/+1 counters decks. I love this deck. I love this deck to pieces. It's been so much fun to play, and I like the deck, but genuinely, I don't like it enough. I'm really sad to say that because it's been a really fun deck to play, and I've always loved the Ixalan Merfolk, and I was so happy to see us go back and get a new commander. But I think if my testing goes well with Magus and Galadriel, I think I will be getting rid of Hackball. I'll be selling off the pieces to have some credit to build these new decks and just moving on with some of the other decks in my box. Now, if Galadriel doesn't work, I will be testing out 4-color Aragorn. But the realization I made is I can put Galadriel on this deck and still make this care about +1/+1 counters with some of the great 3-color support pieces we have in this deck. This deck is nowhere near the deck list done. This is still my brew for it. But even if I do that, this will still be a +1/+1 counters deck. I think it will still mean that Hackball is done. No deck list for Aragorn yet, so I'm not going to put a link down to that one. But I will probably leave my deck list for Hackball around if you care about what I did with it. It's pretty similar to the one that was on the channel. Just made a few changes to make it kind of my own. But again, I'll put that deck list down in the description for y'all so that you guys can enjoy it. Moving from Galadriel, we have Morska, the new Clue Precon from Merz at Karlov Manor. I made the decision going forward that I want to give at least one if a set has 4 precons that come out, I want to pick one of the precons and try to do something with it. Whether it's the 10 card upgrades like we have on the channel, or just trying to give $40 or $50 worth of upgrades to the deck and make it more playable and make it more fun. I wanted to try to start doing this for every set, and it will eventually lead me to having lots of fun decks for either myself or my friends to play. Morska was the deck that I decided on for 2 reasons. 1, the deck has so much great value right out of the box, and 2, even that 10 card upgrade that I did for the channel for $30 makes this deck way better in my opinion. And so the only difference between this deck that sits in front of you and the one on the channel is I edited the land base a little bit more, adding some more lands to it. But really the rest of the deck is very similar to the one that's up on the channel. Adding in Urza and Jaheira to make those clues tap for mana in order to help better fund the deck in general. The 3rd Doctor becomes another threat like Morska to deal damage to our opponents. Senator Peacock and Lonus from the clue set both help the deck a ton. Peacock making all of our artifacts into clues, and Lonus just becoming a value engine for counters. With things like Yoshin Dissident and Rosie Cotton, this deck also becomes a counters deck and can probably just spit out counters on our creatures, and not only just making Morska the threat, but making everything else a threat as well. Danny Pink is going to help draw some cards every time we put counters on each creature per turn, and that seems like it's going to be pretty good to activate all of our second draw per turn effects like Alondra and Ethereal Investigator and a lot of these other effects that deal Joriel and these things that happen the second card you draw on a turn. That makes a ton of sense. We're playing a little bit more into that. Spark Double to copy Morska or something else for more value. Trying out that new Kennen. Sack a clue on your turn to draw a card. You don't have to pay the 2 mana for it, just whenever it attacks. Hey, there you go. You get your second draw on your own turn. Plus, on the sorcery side, you kind of have a growth spiral type effect, right? You don't get to draw, but you can play another land, and if we're drawing enough cards, I think we can really take advantage of that. Adding in Dusk Shell Crawler to give all of our creatures with counters on them trample. We could also play something like Counter the West Tree, but that card costs $15 and Dusk Shell Crawler costs 35 cents. We're effectively getting the same result. We just don't get that basic lands when we hit opponents with the West Tree, but we still get that trample. And I think we're going to do a pretty good job at spreading counters around here, especially when you get something like Academy Manufacturer and Yoshin Dissident out at the same time. You're just going to be spreading counters over all your creatures. I've yet to play with the deck yet. I'm hoping to debut it this Friday night when I go to play at with my local group, and that we play up at a friend's coffee shop. Excited to do that. Excited to see how the deck runs. Again, this is a $240 deck that was probably only $40 up from the precon. I really did not do anything earth-shattering to this deck. A lot of this is exactly how it came out of the box. I just added some pieces in here to make it a little bit better, and I'm excited to see if this deck works. In fact, I bought a Clue Edition, 1 to open up for the channel, and 2 to get Senator Peacock to put in the deck, and hopefully get this Lonus as well, because I think this Lonus is going to be a great card, and I'm happy to put it in there. Well, we talked about taking apart Hackball, that Morska deck will be down in the description as well. And we're going to talk about another deck that I'm very much highly considering taking apart, and that's Carmen. This deck was an absolute blast to play. I think everything I wanted, the idea of what I wanted for this deck was there. I just never got either enough games to test what I really wanted out of the deck, or I really just didn't have enough fun playing the deck. I love the idea. Aristocrats and Vampires, Ixalan's Vampires are perfect for that, in my opinion. Of the 2 of them, I will probably leave this deck together for longer. Let this one play out a little bit longer and see if maybe it's just the wrong time. If I can make some more edits to this and maybe try it again. I think that's what I'm going to do. Hackball might be taken apart before this one. But I might strip a couple parts out of here for credit for other decks and put in some, different things in their slots, but leave this deck together and try to make it work. It's a deck that I've really enjoyed. Carmen's been a value engine at times, winning the game in spots I never expected to win. But as much as I love this deck and it's been fun to play, again, at the moment, it's not there. I think, like I said, I think Hackball comes apart for this. I'm going to leave this in the text box for now. This deck list will be down in the description below as well. But I think it's on its way out. And if I can find another aristocratic style deck that I like more, I think we will sub in for that one. Okay, so those are all the decks that are either in the test box or have yet to be tested. Let's talk about the 2 decks that we're brewing. The first is Caesar, Legion's Emperor, from the new Fallout decks. I saw this card and immediately said, this would either be good in Ishin or Ishin would be good in it. Andrew, one of my good friends who's been on the channel, has an Ishin deck, and I try not to build the same decks as my friends have. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to make it Caesar. Ishin fits perfectly well in the deck, as well as every other card in the deck that cares about attacking and making tokens, because that's what Caesar cares about. Now, this little mini... this deck is nowhere near complete. These are just cards that I dumped in when I read Caesar and thought about where the deck is going. The day that I'm recording this, February 21st, we have seen a little bit of this deck, and I'm seeing that not only is it a tokens deck, but it also seems to have some human synergies to it. And that makes me really happy, because if you've already heard what I talked about in this video, a human deck is something I've always wanted to make, but I just hadn't got there. And this makes me really happy, because the 2 cards I literally want to build this deck for, other than Ishin, are Mishra Claimed by Gix and Commissar Severe Rain. Both these cards have a very similar ability. Whenever they attack, or whatever Mishra says whenever you attacks, Rain says whenever it attacks, each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of other attacking creatures. Mishra says each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of attacking creatures. And a go-wide tokens deck where you can make a bunch of counters, tokens, especially when you attack, and you can stack the triggers. Either of these cards could start dealing massive damage to your opponents each combat. And what I think I like about the idea of Caesar is, one, if I can make it human tribal or human tinged, I would love that, because I've been wanting to build a human deck. But the second is, I think this deck does something that Jetmir doesn't. Jetmir too often is a get to 9, win the game type of deck. It's meant to pound your opponents into the dirt once you get to 9, and it doesn't really care about the nuances of making tokens when you attack, or making tokens, or taking advantage of some of these effects that I've seen an Ishin deck really enjoy. Things like Adeline and Animpakal, are really fun cards that make tokens when they attack. But when you care about effects like Mishra and Commissar, these effects become premium, become really good. Krenko, Tin Street, Kingpin won't effectuate those as much, because they don't come in tapped and attacking. But you can see why something like Othari might be really good, having them come in tapped and attacking. You also have something like Mardu Ascendancy, getting tokens out of the battlefield whenever a non-token creature attacks, coming in tapped and attacking. You get to playing, War Leader's Call, and that fervent charge that is so good in Ishin. These things become really important in a deck like this, and so I'm excited to see if I can make Caesar work the way I want to. Again, when I put this list, we had seen no cards from the Fallout decks except Caesar and Mr. House, which has nothing to do with this deck, and I expect won't be in there. But now that we're starting to see some, spoilers from the set, I'm really excited for this deck. So when we cover this deck on the channel, as a little bit of a sneak peek, you're going to see the 10 card upgrade I do for the channel. We're going to do a regular upgrade of the deck, and then I'm going to give you what I'm planning for on my list, so you can kind of see where I want to go with that, or I might combine that with my upgrade. But I'm excited about this. This is going to be my Fallout deck, most likely, getting to add a bunch of the cards, and I actually am really intrigued to try the bobbleheads out, maybe, if I can make them work in the deck as well. But I like Caesar, I like the aesthetic, and I think he looks pretty cool. So that's one of the 2 decks I'm brewing. So no deck list for that one, because we're nowhere near it. The second is, in a part of those Costco deck boxes that I opened up on the channel, I got a Mind Flayers precon. My original intention was to keep this precon stock, but I think what I'd like to do is, 1 for the channel and 2 for myself, try to do my idea for that 10 card upgrade on this deck and keep it with me at the shop. Take 10 cards out, put 10 cards in, try to make the deck a little bit better without spending too much money. but get a little bit more oomph to the deck and what I want to do. So I'm excited to see what I can do with that. And I'm going to give myself the restriction of 15 cards maximum, but trying to still keep that budget as low as I can so that you're keeping a similar power level, but you're just adding a little bit better consistency to the deck. I think a lot of it's going to come in maybe some better but cheap mana rocks, maybe trying to get a couple dual lands in here if I can, and maybe some other spells, but really just trying to make the deck a little bit better without, putting $300 into it and making it or $400 into making it a top tier horrors deck. That's not the intention. Just a few upgrades, have some fun, and whenever I do that, that will be a video on the channel that you guys will get to see. Well, let me know, what do you guys think of what's currently in my test box and what I'm currently brewing? I'd love to hear what you guys are currently brewing. Throw it down in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys next time.